everybody. Here's another episode with Jimmy Wolf and Jeff Dumbrack. And today we're going to do a topic that was Jeff's idea, and that is our top three comeback albums. We haven't really talked about this since Jeff gave me the idea, but I'm assuming these are records that like either were it was like a very high selling record after several albums that didn't do very well, like commercially, or maybe it was an album that did well after several prior records were, like either commercially unsuccessful or critically panned, possibly, or a band that broke up and then came back together. Might even be maybe a solo artist after the band broke up, perhaps too.
I would say all of the above, Jimmy, except for me personally, I didn't want to do the same old, same old.
Yep.
You know, everybody knows Actung Baby is a big comeback album. I didn't want to, and we've already talked about that.
Yep.
I didn't personally, I didn't choose ones where it was somebody going solo from a band, like after the singer leaves. I didn't do that. I just thought that that's easy, and I wanted to push things a bit this time. For me personally, I mean, you always push them. Maybe I play it safe a little too much. So
yeah,
I just thought it's too easy to play. When the guy goes solo, because there's I could think of 10 immediately where somebody goes solo. Maybe not 10. I can think of 5 right this second where it would be considered a comeback for that person. So anyway.
Yeah. So even if they did go solo, it would have to be for it to be considered a comeback. The band would have been falling off the charts for quite some time, right? For it to be a comeback, but
correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I didn't do any solo albums either. So yeah. Okay. Well, do you want to go first?
Sure. Okay, Jimmy, right off the hop, I'm going to say there are a lot of also in terms another good one here is not I also didn't choose bands whose a record might be called a comeback record, but it is really just the evolution of that band. Whereas, like where each record gets bigger and better than the rest. And an example of that would be like, Hysteria, where, after Pyromania, a lot of people kind of wrote Def Leppard off. Oh, the drummer, what's going to happen? They're taking forever off. Hysteria could be considered a comeback record, but I didn't choose that because, again, we've talked about that. We've talked about Hysteria and how much we love it. And I tried to not play it safe this round. Again, bands like The Cult, where every record they made, you could call Sonic Temple a comeback record, but it's really just a natural evolution of a band. Like all of their, Love to Electric to Sonic Temple. To me, they're not. Sonic Temple's not a comeback. It's just an evolution. Or Slippery When Wet by Bon Jovi. It's not a comeback album over Fahrenheit, whatever the first one was. It's just a band evolving, and it just so happens that's a huge record. So
yeah, and comeback also refers to like kind of a valley or kind of a trough where the band did do well and then they had to do well again, right? Like, yeah, because like Slippery When Wet, it wasn't a comeback because the band like didn't have a massive hit prior to that, really. I mean, I guess the first single was kind of big, but it wasn't a comeback. Yeah, like it's got to be like the band had to have been big before.
Yes, and I feel the ones that I've chosen are very much comebacks. So here we go. They're also in no particular order.
Yeah.
Tango in the Night by Fleetwood Mac.
Oh.
1987. Now, I chose this one because, for one, I remember it very clearly. I remember exactly where I was when this record came out. It was like autumn. And I just remember I didn't know anything about Fleetwood Mac. I didn't know anybody that liked them. It was like old people music, but my dad didn't like them. None of the older people in my family liked them. And then all of a sudden, like Lies and Everywhere are played on the radio all the time. They're and it really was a true comeback for them, because I don't think the early 80s, although like I'm not really aware of their sales, like after Rumors, I think Tusk was 1980, and I think there was another one in there, The Dance or something like that. But I personally don't like Tusk. I know the band likes it, and I think the fans like it, but I don't particularly like it. But Tango in the Night was a really, to me, it was a return to form. I mean, uh, Little Lies, even Family Man, and the album cuts are really good. Like Big Love was really good. Um, and I just, I mean, I found that album again more than 20 years ago, and I just remember really liking it. It's almost like the band almost got another license to popularity, because that was my introduction to that band, and I've kind of I've liked them ever since. And that particular era of Fleetwood Mac is my favorite personally. Those songs, those Christine McVie songs, which is why when she decided that she wasn't going to tour with them in, like, I think it was 2002 or 2003, she kind of like retired from the group. To me, the band like suffered. And then I even saw them in 2000, and was it 2013? She wasn't there, and they skipped over all those songs. Like, they didn't sing any of her songs, which I thought was, it was lackluster. And that's why, that Fleetwood Mac concert to me is one of the lowest points in uh, my concert going past. I've seen a lot of shows, and that one just wasn't terribly memorable to me, because again, they skipped over all her songs, which to me are very important. So Tango in the Night, Fleetwood Mac.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Uh, Number two, uh, really big one, again, very special to me, the Wedding album, Duran Duran.
Nice.
Talk about a comeback in every sense of the word. So with Duran Duran, I mean, they did, in 1984, they put out like a live album with the song Wild Boys. Then they broke up. They went and did the band kind of went two different ways. Some of them formed Power Station, some of them formed Arcadia. Power Station was really good. Arcadia sucked. Then they got back in '86 and did Notorious. And then they had Big Thing in '88. And all of these albums are having increasingly low sales. And then 1990, they had an album called Liberty, which was all but forgotten about. I mean, there are no Duran Duran greatest hits in that album, maybe save for one, and that's maybe just me personally saying that. But again, the problem with, I think, Duran Duran in those days is they just kept cranking out the albums, and they're almost a bit desperate to stay relevant, to stay important, and stay part of the public eye, that they just never really went away. And although, like, I like those albums, I like Notorious. I actually really like Big Thing. Notorious, not so much. Um, but like, it's true, when a band never goes away, you never miss them, and it's almost like you get tired of seeing them a little bit. So with the Wedding album in '93, they took their time. It was 3 years. That's the largest gap that had ever been between a Duran Duran album. Stunning. And some of their absolute greatest hits. And the band was injected with a new Warren Cucurulo joining the band as a full-time member. I mean, that really was a shot in the arm to that band, because Ordinary World and Come Undone, which are the two most definite standout cuts on that album, still to this day are amongst their greatest songs ever. And that those songs have Warren Cucurulo written all over them. Now, epic guitar, like, if we're going to talk Ordinary World on its own, you have possibly Simon Le Bon's greatest vocal, amongst the most luscious and plush keyboard arrangements from Nick Rhodes, and like sweeping epic guitar solos from Warren Cucurulo. Like, it truly, to me, that's my personal favorite Duran Duran song, and it would be in my top 10 of all songs of all time. it would be in my top 10 for sure. It's that special to me. And anyway, the wedding album. What more can I say? It also sounds current. It was a bit Duran Duran were kind of known for being happy and poppy, and like it was music you played at the party. This album was introspective and just more. I don't want to use the word darker, more reflective. Let's just say. I found the subject matter a little meatier. It's not just about Notorious and how great they are. It just there's a depth to the songwriting that I think maybe was kind of lost in some of their work as of late. So anyway, the wedding album. Number 3, again, no particular order. Elegantly Wasted.
Oh, nice.
In Excess. Again, very memorable to me. 97, like these guys came back. And the thing with In Excess is they'd never really taken time off. Like they were consistently putting out albums in the 90s. So Kick was 87. X with that Suicide Blonde, really good album. That was 1990. Then they had, I think, Full Moon Dirty Hearts was 92. And they had Welcome to Wherever You Are in 94. Both, to diminishing sales. They had a Greatest Hits in 95, which, celebrated their best work. And, it was a good Greatest Hits. But, Crash Boom Bang 97, Elegantly Wasted comes out. And, man, they are back on top. Like, Dance Floor Rocker. They got that sex appeal back that, Elegantly Wasted is sexy. It's got a kind of it's got a groove to it. It's, it's funky, but rocky. And I mean, it's got everything that band does best. And, I normally I'm a little apprehensive when a band calls their album the lead single, right? It means like we're just, we're showing you all we got right off the hop, but not so. This album's not like that. There's a lot more deep cuts on that. Cherry Baby, really good. It's just a really memorable album to me. I remember buying it in 98. I bought that Greatest Hits from 95, absolutely loved it. And then I went out and bought Elegantly Wasted right after. And although, it must be said, Elegantly Wasted is the best song on the album. It's still a Trump tight album, and again, it really does what they do best. Whereas the other two albums that came before it, where the critical and commercial, I don't think they were failures. I mean, and there was some good cuts on them. They just weren't. They didn't have the impact, or like they didn't bring the funk like they did on Elegantly Wasted. So, number 3, In Excess. Also, honorable mention goes to Ray of Light by Madonna.
Oh, yeah, great one, actually.
Yeah, huge one. Again, she came out of nowhere. The 90s were rough on her. In fact, you can a pretty good tangent to In Excess where like 1990 Madonna at top of her game, Vogue, the Dick Tracy movie, Justify My Love, and the Immaculate Collection was in 1991, I think. And then, there was the Erotica album and the Bedtime Stories album, which again diminished sales compared to, Vogue was 89 and it was 10 mil plus. Immaculate Collection, which was the Greatest Hits and it had 2 new songs, but again, 10 mil plus. And then you have these other two where again, it's almost like Madonna was a bit full of herself and didn't really, she just thought, making songs about sex is gonna carry her through, and it didn't really translate well. She lost about a bit of her audience, but Ray of Light comes in, and again Madonna right on the dance floor. That's where she belongs. And anyway, so I kind of snuck the 4th one in there, but anyway, Jimmy,
That's
what
great
say
one.
you?
Okay. Okay, yeah. My picks are pretty obvious. So my number one, this just came to me just because of all the times I've taught songs from this record to a lot of my younger students. And I'm going to go with Green Day's "American Idiot."
Hmm.
So they had,
Safe choice, Jimmy.
yeah. So Dookie was like probably is their biggest record. I think that was like 20 million just in the United States alone. So that was a massive record. But then they had three albums between that album and American Idiot that didn't do that well. There was Insomniac from 1994, sorry, 95, and then they had Nimrod from 97. Uh, Time of Your Life was a big hit from that album, and then they had Warning in 2000. Um, but these albums were, they still did well, but not nearly as well as Dookie or American Idiot. And then when American Idiot came out, a whole bunch of hits from this record. Um, and I think it's sold, I don't know, it's got to be multi-time platinum here. Let me just see here.
Over 10, I think.
Over 10?
I think so.
I wouldn't be surprised. Let's see here. Worldwide, yeah, worldwide 16 million. And that's in 2004, which was, a time where records weren't selling a whole lot. So yeah, 16 million copies sold in 2004 is pretty good. So yeah, and then the hits from that album is American Idiot, Wake Me Up When September Ends, Holiday,
Boulevard of Broken
and
Dreams.
Boulevard of Broken Dreams. Yeah, so they're all massive songs, right? Arguably it's their best record. I mean, if you put it head to head with like Dookie, it would. There's definitely a good argument that it's better than Dookie. So yeah, so that's my first one. Second one's a pretty obvious choice for me, just because I'm a huge fan of this band. AC/DC.
Razor's Edge.
I'm gonna go with Razor's Edge. Yeah. Now online, I did a bit of research, and people are saying that Back in Black was their comeback record, which for me, I think it's too close to Highway to Hell. It was like months, you know. And Highway to Hell was a very successful album as well. So I don't really see that as a comeback. I see that as a miraculous sort of continuation of their success, right? But with Razor's Edge though, there was so basically between Back in Black and Razor's Edge, there was a 10-year gap where the band's album sales just kept declining. Now I'm a huge fan of all those middle albums. There was For Those About to Rock We Salute You in '81. There was Flick of the Switch in '83. Fly on the Wall '85 and Blow Up Your Video in '88. Which I mean I'm sure most people haven't heard of those records, but yeah, then they came out with Razor's Edge. They did the whole classic Go to Vancouver and Try Harder, and they hired Bruce Fairbairn. And yeah, I mean I guess if there's one single that you can say that is probably their biggest song in their entire career, that's Thunderstruck. So,
Amongst the greatest solos of all time, and also very interesting that the solo is the main riff, which is incredible. That
yeah, and it pretty much goes throughout the entire song.
very very badass, and very memorable too. 1990,
Yeah,
killing it.
yeah, and I mean the world was talking about AC/DC again. I mean they were so big anyway; they didn't really go away. I mean because of their legacy with Back in Black and Highway to Hell, but this actually made them current again. Like this made them trendy. They were actually currently releasing things, and yeah, it was. I saw the video for Thunderstruck on Much Music. I thought it was the coolest thing I've ever seen. With like everyone kind of fist bumping in that sort of looked like an opera house.
It looked like the Thunderdome.
Yeah, yeah, totally. It's like a Thunderdome and an opera house kind of mashed up together. Yeah, super cool. There are some other singles from this album, like Money Talks. Those songs haven't really stood the test of time. It's really just Thunderstruck, right? But that's all you really need. I think you just need one song, right?
Any single rock band on earth would kill to have that one, like even if you were a one-hit wonder, could you imagine that just that was your one? Your like, oh man, what a I actually think that is by far their greatest song ever, and better than anything on Back in Black. And even though I like Highway to Hell more, uh, like I remember being a young lad. I was in like the seventh grade, I think, when that dropped, and I was like, is this the same guys that did like that? I thought ACDC were like old people rock, and then boom, they come back and it's brand spanking new. You know,
Well, and there's that interesting concept too of like, when ACDC did Back in Black, they were probably what, like in their late 20s, maybe 20. Say they're 27, right? When they're doing Thunderstruck, they're 37, but they're still like they still look like they don't look old yet, right? Like if you look
no.
at ACDC now, like like they're like in their 70s and 80s probably, right? So they're older now, right? But like with when you see them with Thunderstruck, they're still cool, right? Like they still seem they just don't seem old yet. So I think a lot of like bands that were big in the 70s and have comebacks in the 80s or whatever, big in the 80s, they come back in the 90s. It still looks like the same band. Like they don't look that much older, right? So it's not that jarring to see, you know. I don't know.
I remember the parallel to me was that the Stones that year came out with the Steel Wheels
Oh yeah.
tour. And so that was like the advertising for that was everywhere. And all the old people were like, oh my God, the Stones are back. And oh my God, we're going to let's go see the Stones, who weren't relevant to me at all. And then ACDC, whom are not of the same vintage. Uh, but, I mean, I would have been 12 or 11 then. So to me, anything pre 1980 is just old. So I lumped them in the same category. Uh, and then they come out and they're as fresh as can be. And like that is fresh, current, hot, and it rocks like all the other new current, like they were rocking like Motley Crue, and they were rocking like uh, Poison and all the current bands that were cool and hip, and suddenly AC/DC's right back on top again. So
Yep. Yep. Okay, so I mean, I mean, one of the most obvious ones I can say is Aerosmith, but I thought that was too I thought that was too obvious. So I'm gonna go with Black Sabbath. The album is Heaven and Hell. So you could also say I don't know if this is cheating, but you can also say that Ozzy Osbourne's Blizzard of Oz could be tied, um, because both like Ozzy was in Black Sabbath, and so what happened with Black Sabbath? Their first album up until I would say Sabotage, um, they had a string of fantastic records, and Sabotage is one of my favorite Black Sabbath albums, and that came out in '75. But between 1975 and 1980, like most rock bands, probably at the end of the '70s, they were getting burned out with drugs, and their sales were starting to go down. They released Technical Ecstasy in 1976, and that album was just not as strong as the previous albums. I mean, it's got some moments, but it's more of a rock record. The band is definitely losing their edge there. Then the band released Never Say Die in 1978, and I really like that album, but like again, there's a lot of brand confusion. There's a lot of jazz songs on that record, kind of that like horns. It doesn't sound like Black Sabbath, and it didn't do well. There really wasn't any hits off it. So so Ozzy left the band after that record, and in 1980, Black Sabbath recruited Ronnie James Dio, and they released Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, and those two records are considered by many Black Sabbath fans to be the band's best output. Like Heaven and Hell is a fantastic album, and the fact that they were able to reinvent themselves for the '80s, that was also very important. That they could transition into an '80s band, and also Ozzy did the exact same thing, and was even more successful with his solo career as well. So yeah, I'm just gonna tie it. Ozzy Osbourne's Blizzard of Oz and Black Sabbath's Heaven and Hell. Definite comeback from '70s oblivion.
I also think, Jimmy, we could have included some bands where even though I didn't want to do that, uh, but a band like Alice in Chains, where they
Yep.
come back with a new singer many, many, many years later, like
Yep.
over a decade later, they come out with a new singer where they have a bit of they're reinvigorated. They realize that they love playing together and they don't really want this thing to be over. And like the creativity in the band is not, even though one member is gone, the essence of the band is still intact enough that even if you bring in a new entity, you know, the the sum is greater than the individual parts. There's a synergy there where, and I think Alice in Chains definitely had that. I think when Black Gives Way to Blue came out, I don't think a lot of people really like Alice in Chains with the new singer, but I really do. Um, that's one I could think of, and
Yeah, like one other honorable mention for me was Tom Petty. So he had so this is where it gets a little confusing because
that's a good one actually too. I never even thought
yeah.
about that one.
So with I mean, I guess technically the band was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and they released their last massive record was Damn the Torpedoes in 1979, and then there wasn't really a whole lot um, in the 80s until Tom Petty released his first solo record called Full Moon Fever, and that is, you know, probably his most important album, and that's the album that we all know. But then again, it's like, like, do you really see Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers being different from Tom Petty? I mean, it's kind of the same thing, right?
Well, it's only the same thing because they kind of packaged it up that way, but it wasn't, because when he went solo, he was tired of the. So here's what I learned about Tom Petty in like the Damn the Torpedoes era, or like when they first got signed. Like they were a band, they were a gang, a group of brothers, and so all the money was split up evenly, like regardless of who did what. They were all important members of the group. But their manager said to Tom, he said, you need to really rethink this because you're going to resent those guys. And I'll tell you why. He says the band is called Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. It's not just the Heartbreakers. And, you know, you're the one who's going to get up at 5 a.m. and go do radio promo. And you're the one who's going to be on, on TV. Nobody gives a shit what the drummer thinks. Okay. So your role in the band is going to be much greater than those guys who are going to get to sleep until 2 p.m. every day with their girlfriends and go out and bang groupies every night, while you have to show up early in the morning and do things and be hungover, and you're going to have a greater role in the band. So he went back to them and said, all right, boys, things are changing. It's going to be like, we're going to do it up, as it needs to be done. And, the money gets split up according to, like, I get the most because I do the most, and the drummer, you get nothing. And the band revolted. The band were like, fuck this, who do you, and Tom Petty says, look, I'll go get some more Heartbreakers if I need to. So you can either roll with it or not. And they reluctantly did, but over a decade of that happening, of him being the one that wakes up and doing the radio, and the other guys bringing their girlfriends on tour and just like not doing fuck all and stuff like that. And the money, the band was resentful of the money. And also the band, I think, was a bit resentful of Mike Campbell Mike Campbell was getting songwriting credits and making more money than the rest of them. So Tom Petty just got fed up with all the bands bickering and shit. And he said, fuck it, I'm just going to do a Tom Petty record. Fuck you guys. And went and did his own thing. And Mike Campbell was on that record too, because him and Tom just had a better working relationship. And again, I think the band really realized, like, my God, like we could be out of a job here if this continues. Like, he really can go solo, and people don't really care much about the Heartbreakers. So
Yeah.
they, I think they kind of, Tom got the ducks in line, and and kind of established a pecking order that that the band kind of followed from that point on. And I guess it's what needed to happen in that band to keep things rolling. But like, to me, that the best stuff that group did was just Tom Petty's solo, the Full Moon Fever, and didn't he have 3 solo records in a row? There was that one, the Into the
Yep.
great, the Great Wide Open, or something like that, or
Yep. And Highway Companion.
yeah. And then there was the one with Let's Get to the Point, Let's Roll Another Joint. You Don't Know How It Feels. It was the big hit on that one. Wallflowers was a Tom Petty solo album, wasn't it?
Wallflowers.
Anyway, I think that was maybe.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Wildflowers was okay, so this is what's confusing. Yeah, so Full Moon Fever, Wildflowers, and Highway Companion are his 3 solo records. But Into the Great Wide Open is Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Okay.
All right.
So it shows, that Tom, he loves the brothers in the band, but he's also, not going to take any shit from them either. And honorable mention, you could also say to All That You Can't Leave Behind by U2 as well.
Yep.
Definitely comeback record for them, and not the easy one that Actung Baby would be. But it's too easy to talk about U2, so I'm gonna we're gonna let sleeping dogs lie.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And you kind of just made me think about the Rolling Stones too. You could say that I'd almost say that Voodoo Lounge for me is their comeback record. The Steel Wheels tour, I think, or the Steel that whole tour was a comeback for the Stones for sure. But I think in the '90s, the Stones kind of reinvented themselves and made themselves current again, which is pretty cool.
The Voodoo Lounge was in the late '90s, right? Like '97, something like that. '98, maybe.
94. I guess.
94. Okay.
Yeah,
I do remember that too.
Yep. Yeah.
But again, to me, they had a song called "Anybody Seen My Baby."
Yeah,
when that
was after Voodoo Lounge. Yeah, that was which sounded like Constant Craving, right? Like by Katie Lang.
It did, and it had a Biz Markie sample in it, which
okay,
and that kind of sounded like they were trying to be new or modern or hip, but
that was that was Bridges to Babylon, which I didn't like that album as much. But Voodoo Lounge I felt was pretty cool.
I'm not a Stones fan in the least, and I feel like to give them credit, they always, or at least in those days anyway, in the '90s, when they put out a new record, they tried to be progressive.
Yep.
I personally don't feel that it never resonated with me.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, I can see in that one song, "Anybody Seen My Baby," like you have like to introduce myself.
Yeah.
They had like a hip hop sample in the background. It was way low in the mix.
Yeah.
But
and I probably wouldn't include it because I just don't think any of anything of any of the newer stuff touched what they did in the '70s, right? Like that was what they did in the '70s was just so perfect that as decent as the newer stuff was, it can't really be considered as good as their older material.
I suppose if you're if the Stones are your favorite band ever, you're probably gonna have some things to say about that, and fair game. I'm sure. I could certainly listen to an argument for that too, because you got to respect them. The Stones can't be like, they can't be written off. Like they do stay current regardless of, like, someone's buying those albums and people are paying for those tickets, right? So they haven't gone anywhere, and they may be ancient, but people still love what they do, and they still sell records. So you got to give it up to them.
For sure. But there was definitely a time in the '80s when the Stones were kind of starting to get forgotten with like Dirty Work and you know. So yeah, I mean that yeah, there was definitely, but yeah, like since the Steel Wheels, the Stones have been an institution. They've never gone anywhere. They're as relevant as ever.
You could also say Jimmy, "Lick It Up" by Kiss.
Oh
Even
yeah,
though I don't like Kiss, but talk about a comeback. Geez, you take the makeup off,
yeah,
and wow, a bit gimmicky, but
yeah. I thought of Kiss as well. The only reason that I wouldn't agree with that is that I think Creatures of the Night that came right before Lick It Up was amazing as well. Like that was a great record, and it's a lot of Kiss fans rank that as their favorite album. So, but yeah, it is technically a comeback for sure because of the makeup going, and they got a lot more commercially successful.
isn't that the first one with Vinnie Vincent?
Yes, it
Or was
is.
he named Creatures?
Yeah, yeah,
So I remember that video for Lick It Up, and like with just the post-apocalyptic, it looked like Mad Max.
oh yeah, it's great.
And here comes Kiss walking through with a legion of chicks behind them, and like it was
It's a great song. It's such a catchy tune, huh?
to me that was Christ in '83. Like man, I was 5, and I remember seeing that video and being like, man, this is awesome. These guys, these guys got it going on at 5 and 6.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting too, like the whole like I guess the whole like lick, right? And Gene Simmons had his tongue out, and it's like I guess is it like is it? I guess you can use your tongue when you kiss, so it's related to the title Kiss. But yeah, there was a lot of licking analogy. Which,
There's a double, triple, and even quadruple entendre going on there with,
that's true
and they certainly wanted you to think like chicks licking it up,
for sure.
slurping it down.
Yeah,
But like lick it up, like the actual riff is what's the main thing of that track. Like
that's true.
that,
The guitar
to me
lick. Yeah, yeah.
is how I'm sure that's how they would argue it. But also, I mean, truly, the track was really riff driven, and it was a strong and strident riff that was highly recognizable and memorable.